Hey everybody, I am going to give you a overall intro to Adobe Animate CC. It's a powerful animation program. It's been used for years in the animation industry as well as the web design industry, but we're not going to go through that right now. So animation, here we go. Animate CC is fairly easy. It allows you to create animation symbols that will allow you to reuse it over and over, and it'll allow you to create complex rigs that enable you to animate faster, so you don't have to use frame by frame animation if you want to. Now, if you want to use frame by frame animation, perfectly fine. You can do that too. But yeah, here we go. We're going to dive right in. So first thing we're going to go into is the top menu here. Any program that you've ever used will always have a top menu. Okay, pretty much you'll always have a file, edit, view, and even though this is on Apple or on a Mac, what I'm going to tell you will relate to PC as well. Okay, so it's totally like the concepts transfer over. All the buttons are on the same places. The only difference is a couple keystrokes might be different. Okay. Alright, so file, you've got the new, you've got the open, browse and bridge. Bridge is another external program that will allow you to explore your files on your computer. It's like a Windows Explorer type deal where you can just look at all your files, and it'll allow you to save like presets and stuff that then you can refer back later if you want to. Open recent will allow you to open the files that you've created. Close will close the application. Close all will close all of the applications or the projects that you have. Save. So Command S or Control S is save. Control Shift S or Command Shift S is save. Save as template, which you can use as a template later. Save all will basically save every project that you have open. Now, import. You can import symbols into your stage, images, whatever, or you can import into your library. And the stage is this white thing here. The library is this thing right here. Okay, the library holds all of your assets, so everything that you import or everything that you create will populate here. The stage is basically like your canvas. It's like the area that you work on. Cool. Alright, so back to here. Export will do the opposite of import. It'll export everything. So once you've created all of your animation, everything is animating and the sounds and stuff are happening, you can export that project as one single image, or you can export as a legacy, which is like the old way of them exporting Adobe's the Flash. The old way of exporting, which is from Adobe Flash. You can export the movie, which it will export a SWF file. Video, which will export from Media Encoder. So when you hit this and you hit OK, Media Encoder will pop up, and then you'll have to set your settings from there and then hit export. So basically this launches an external application that will allow you to export a video. Export animated GIF will generate an animated GIF. Publishing settings is important. This will allow you to specify the SWF files that you can export. Okay, a SWF file is I think it's a shockwave file. Way back in the day, shockwave was like the file setting for a lot of games. Like, I don't know if you guys remember Newgrounds.com, but they'll use like the Shockwave application to play a lot of their games. But yeah, that's why it's called SWF, Shockwave file. I'm not sure what this is, so we're going to skip that. This is for like if you wanted to export an HTML5 version of your animation. Adobe Animate does a good job of converting all of your animations into HTML5 so you can play it on the web if you want to, as like a website instead of a video. But you know, this doesn't really matter too much. We can even like leave it unchecked if we want to. So the only thing that would really matter is your Flash file, okay? Especially if you're exporting as a SWF file. This will allow you to name that project, so project instead of unknown. And then this image quality will allow you, because whenever you export a Flash file, if you're using JPEGs or PNGs or whatever in your project, Adobe will default to 80%, which means that it'll compress that image 80% from its original file size so that the video can play quicker, right? And especially because this program is prone for the web, it's going to try to reduce the file size as much as it can. But if you just want the whole 100% full res version, then I would change this to 100. You can keep these the same. This is just your audio setting. But for some reason, when you export out a SWF file and your audio sounds super muffled or compressed, you can then change this from fast to best. Yeah, this can stay the same, but best. And that will allow you to hear a better sounding audio. All this advanced stuff you can just keep the same. If you're working on like a sensitive file and you wanted to have it password protected, you can check this and then type in a password. And so whenever somebody sees a SWF file, they'll have to type in a password in order to see it. Okay. Everything else you can just keep the same, and you just hit OK. So that's what that is there. Okay. Publish basically exports out a SWF file for you. ActionScript settings. ActionScript was the scripting language that they used for interactivity in a lot of web games back in the day, so you don't really need to know it, so you can just keep this the way it is. Okay. Edits. So undo's Control Z, redo's Control Y or Command Y, Command Z, Control X. Basically, all the shortcuts are right here. So if you want to know the shortcuts, just hover over here and remember them. Okay. This little symbol means command, but on PC it'll look different, but it basically means you hold down Control and then you hit this button. Okay. Find and replace is awesome because you can find and replace a lot of text, a lot of color. You can also find and replace symbols and stuff. This is timeline stuff, so you can remove frames, you can cut frames, you can duplicate frames, and here are their shortcuts as well. Okay. Yeah. The thing that I use a lot is the copy and paste in place. So Control C, Control Shift V will do that for you. Okay, or Command. View. You basically go into this jumps from the. So if you're using scenes here, it'll jump from the first scene to the next scene, and so on and so forth. Scenes are great for, especially if you're planning on working just in Animate alone without using any external programs. I would highly recommend using the scene setup. And to access it, you have to go over here to Windows and hit Scenes. And here it is. So if I made a new scene here, so there's my scenes, and then I can go here, and now I can jump to the first scene, or go to scene 2. Go to the last scene. This is scene 4, or go back to the first scene. Okay, and these are shortcuts as well here. All right, so that's what that is. Zoom in is Command minus and plus. Okay. You can do Command 1 or Control 1 and it'll fit the screen to 100%, or you can just hit fit to window. Rulers will turn on the rulers, so if you want that accuracy, you know, you can start using like these guidelines here, and this will help you set up like safe areas. A lot of times when you do an animation, you don't want words or stuff to be like all the way close to the edge here. You want a little bit of a safe margin, so that, you know, it's legible when you export it. Okay, so to get rid of these, you just drag them out. To get them, you just hover over the ruler and drag them down. But to use them, you have to have the rulers on. Okay, because, you know, now you can't do it. See, grid area will turn on the grid for you, which is useful because then you can snap to the grid. So I can create like something here. It's not snapping because I don't have to turn snap on. So go down here, snapping, snap to grid. And so now it'll snap to the grid. Now it's snapping to the middle section. Okay, that's just the way it is. If you want to change that, you can go over here to the far right. No. Yeah, there you go. So it depends on where your mouse is. If your mouse is in the middle, it'll snap to the middle. If your mouse is on the corner, it'll snap to the corner. That's good to know, okay? So we'll turn grids off. You can also edit your grid. So instead of 10 pixels across and 10 pixels up and down, you can set them to 1 pixels, and so on and so forth. Okay, snapping. These are all your snapping options. You can snap to align, snap to grid, snap to guide. Snapping align will snap to each object. Snapping to the grid will snap to the grid. Snapping to the guide will snap to the guides that you saw earlier. And snapping to pixels will snap to pixels. If you don't know what pixels are like the little, whenever you open up like a JPEG image and you zoom all the way in, you see the little squares, those are pixels. That's what they are. So snap to objects will snap to each other. Snaps to the objects to each other. And those are basically the only options that are you know, important on here. So insert, you can insert a new symbol. You can have options for the timeline, and you can insert a new scene. Modify, you can modify your different objects here. Text, there's all your fonts, your font sizes, styles. You can align them. Text align, you know, center, left, down, whatever. Letter spacing will increase the space in between each letter, but right now it's grayed out because I don't have any letters selected. Commands, these are more for like creating applications or creating, this is non-animation stuff, so you don't have to worry about this. Control to test movie. But this is how you test the movie, so you can see how it looks like at the end. Debug is the application stuff, so we don't have to worry about that. Windows will turn on the different areas that you need for tools and stuff. So like actions here, these are like the scripting stuff. Code snippets are scripting stuff. All of these are code snippet stuff. Align tool is important because you can, if I make an object here, 2 objects here, and I want them both to align base to the top of the edge, that'll align that way. See? So yeah, aligning tools are awesome. Align to stage will align tools to the stage. So now that's how I know both of them are on top of each other and they're completely centered to the stage. Okay, color turns on color. Your color switcher. Info tells you where your mouse is at and the information about each object that you draw. Swatches are your color swatches. Transform is the things that, so like I can select this and you know, transform it around. I can rotate it right here. So basically this is a way of doing it without having to use your mouse. You can flip things. Cool. Components. So these are like web scripting stuff, so you don't have to worry about that. History is, gosh, emails. History, so everything that you've done is a history and you can undo. So if I click on this and hit replay, it'll undo it. Okay. So basically history means you can go backwards and forwards in the actions that you've done. Okay, so if you want to undo like 10 steps instead of hitting Control Z a bunch of times, you can just click on that and it'll just jump to the 10th step. Scenes, I showed this earlier, you can jump to scenes here. So for example, I have this scene here, this scene here, this scene here, this scene here. So now each scene has a different object here, okay? And basically, when you think of a movie, each scene is like a different location. So you want to make a new scene for a new location that you're going to animate. You don't have to worry about this. Extensions, this is where Keyframe Caddy is. So if you don't know how to use Keyframe Caddy, I have a video from before that explains how you install that. So take a look at that. Your add-ons are like your plugins and stuff that you can get for Adobe Animate, which they have a ton of super helpful stuff, so definitely advise you to check that out. Workspaces, so it starts off as the essentials, but some people like to work in the animation panel. I like to work on the essentials because, you know, that's what I'm used to, but it's really up to you. You can experiment with these and see which one you like the best. Hide panel basically just hides out the panels. And then this tells you what files you have open here. So that's an overview of the top menu here. This is the stage. This is like the breadcrumbs area, so you know, so you can create these things called symbols. So if I select this and convert this into a symbol, say box here, and then I went inside the symbol by selecting it and double clicking. This is called a breadcrumbs. Okay, so this tells you where you are in the scene. Cool. So this is the scene, and the stage is the white area. Here are your different tabs, action tabs that you can use. So the properties tab is the most useful one in my opinion, because this will allow you to change stuff. You know, so it defaults to 55/400, but I want you to say 1280 by 720. Okay, this is the most optimal resolution for. Let me close my scenes here for you know, video animation. Okay, this is like a HD monitor. So I highly recommend this, and it works well on YouTube as well. Okay, so 1280 by 720. Scale content basically means whenever you draw something and then you zoom in, you draw something again, the size, the like the drawing size stays the same. So actually, you know what? I don't know what that does. Scales content along with the stage. Well, there you go. Scales content along with the stage. I never had to use that. So this, you can change the stage color. Let me delete the rest here. Swift history will tell you all of the Swifts you exported. I haven't exported a Swift yet, so that's why you don't see any. Accessibility. Yeah, I've never used this either, but I'm guessing you can name it and you can just hit a description. So when a person that is blind that runs into your Swift file, the reader will say what it is, okay, instead of them watching your video. So the library, again, I told you earlier, it holds all of your assets that you produce or import. See, earlier I just made like a symbol for the box, and there it is. It lives here in this library. And then I can drag it to the stage as many times as I want and reuse it over and over and over again. And this is the power of Adobe Flash here. Not Flash, Adobe Animate. It used to be called Flash. Okay, so for example, if I change this color, now all of the boxes change as well. Okay, and that's because they're all the same symbol. So this allows you to just use one thing, and if you need to change it or modify it somehow, it will change all instances of that symbol instead of you having to manually go change them all your own. Super useful. Here's the toolbox area here. You've got your selection tool. You've got your selection tool, which the difference is this selection tool allows me to select the objects. This allows me to select the multiple anchor points that make up this object. Cool. And then we have the free transform tool. So for example, the free transform tool will allow me to resize the objects, scale it, rotate it, and I rotate it by hovering over one of these corners here. It also allows me to manipulate the anchor point of this object. So when I rotate it, now it's rotating on this axis instead of being rotated in the middle. So that's the point of rotation, okay? The anchor point controls the point of rotation. You've got the 3D rotation tool, which only works if you have a symbol that isn't a graphic, that's a movie clip, okay? So now I can use this and rotate it around in 3D, which is pretty cool. I think it's alright. I mean, if you're only animating in Adobe Animate, then this would be pretty cool. But I like to use After Effects as well as other programs to achieve, 3D-ish stuff. The next one is the Lasso tool. So the Lasso tool will allow me to select an area. So for example, if I want this area to be deleted, I can just select that area and delete it. It's a lot quicker than using the eraser tool, which you have to erase over and over like that, which can be a pain. Okay, so yeah, definitely recommend using the Lasso tool over the eraser tool any day. Next one is the pen tool. And each one of these will have like a little arrow pointing down, so if you hold down on it, you have other tools at your disposal as well. And I'll just let you kind of discover those on your own. I don't want this video to be super long. The pen tool, you click, 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 and you create anchor points. See, not anchor points. Yeah, anchor points. That allow you to use the selection tool, and you can click on it and move it around and further manipulate the shape that you're trying to create. So you can click, 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 or you can click and then drag, which will create a curve. And if I click again, it'll try to curve that area. But if I want this point to be sharp, instead of clicking again, I can click on this anchor points the second time, and it'll get rid of that Bezier handle there. So these handles, so now there's only one, and then that allows me to create a sharp edge. And then I can click on the last anchor point, and then oops, sorry, gotta start here. You click on this last one. Oh, I'm all effed up now. I'm all messed up. Okay, here we go. Click to see how that circle pops. That means that you're closing the loop. Okay, so that means this is a closed shape now, which means, you know, there's no gaps in it. Alrighty. So that's the pen tool. Text tool allows you to type text. Okay. It's pretty self-explanatory, but if you double click on all the text and hit Control T, not Control T, sorry. Windows, we're looking for oh yeah, the text, here we go. Then we can pick like whatever text you want. I typically don't use text in Flash because I export all of my scenes into After Effects and use the text tools there because it's much better. Yeah, so there we go. That's what that is. Delete that. Next is the line tool. If you don't like the pen tool, the line tool is probably your second best bet, because then I can create a line and use my selection tool and hover over that line. That'll allow me to create a curve. See that? There we go. So next is the primitive rectangular tool. I can draw rectangles if I hold down Shift, or not hold down Shift, but just hold down on this arrow. I get the rectangular primitive tool, which allows me to do stuff like this, which is pretty cool. Ellipse tool makes a circle. The ellipse oval tool allows me to do other stuff like that. So if you need to create like a pie shape or something, or a donut, then you can do so here. Next is the pencil tool. So this is like allows you to draw a line, and probably not a line. It's line. A line basically is called a stroke here. Okay, so you're drawing a stroke. Next is the paintbrush tool. Now you're drawing a you're drawing a stroke here as well, because this is the new paintbrush tool, but they also have the old brush tool. So this is paintbrush tool and this is brush tool. Brush tool draws a fill. Okay. And the difference between the two is, let me just get rid of all of this. I'll just hit Control A or Command A and delete, and that'll delete all of it. So here we go. This is the paintbrush tool, and this is the brush tool. So the paintbrush tool, when I double click on it, I can set like the style of it, right? In the Properties tab. I can also set if I change this back, I can set the width of it in the Properties tool. Over here, when I double click here, I can't, none of this is available to me because this is a fill. And you'll see like the real difference here when I click on, use my selection tool and I click on this stroke. See, the stroke is basically the anchor points they're connecting to each other using a line, whereas the fill it uses the anchor points to draw an outline around the color. Okay, so that's the difference. The point, you're using less anchor points if you're using a stroke than a fill. Okay, and just think, a stroke is just a line, a fill is a color that's being filled in, or is an outline that's being filled in with color. So those are the differences here. Bone tool, we're going to skip that because it's the most unused, the most not very useful tool that I can think of. Paintbrush, the paint bucket tool allows you to fill in a color with an area like that. Now, if you have a gap in your paint in your area, it's not going to allow you to fill it, right? But, however, you can go over here to gap sizes and close large gaps. And if your gap is super large, it still won't do it. But if it's small enough, then it'll do it. I'm not sure what the ratio, like the ratio of when it won't fill the gap, but just know that if there's a gap in your outline, then it's not going to fill it in unless you do this, and it'll fill it in sometimes. This ink bottle is basically the opposite of the paint bucket. Paint bucket fills in color. The ink bottle does the opposite, so it'll fill in strokes of fill color. So see how it put a stroke, that white stroke, on that fill color there that I just drew. The eyedropper will copy color from whatever you already have. So like right there, so now the fill is there. Which brings me to these two here. So this is your stroke color, and this is your fill color. Your stroke color is whatever you eyedrop, right? So if I hover over an object and I get that little square, that means that I just copied that stroke color. If I don't have a square, then it'll just copy the fill color, okay? The next is the eraser tool, which just erases. This tool is pretty cool because then with just a regular stroke, you can play with the width there. See that? Sometimes. There we go. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, sometimes works. But that's what that does. This is your, apparently there's a camera now that you can animate. So let's see. There we go. And if I need like a keyframe here, and I want to be circle there, and then I want to add a tween. So before, in earlier versions, you'd have to use this thing called the VCam in order to animate your camera. But now, Adobe Animate has its own camera that you can animate, which is pretty freaking cool. You can also rotate it. Yeah, pretty freaking cool. Next is the hand tool. You can move around. And then the zoom tool, which will zoom in. Or if you hold down Alt, you can zoom out. Which you can do that with Control plus or minus, or Command plus or minus. These will change the colors back to the default, and this will swap the colors. And that, in the timeline. Timeline has layers, right? So I can create as many layers as I want, and then I can create keyframes. So this lighter gray color means there's something on this layer. This darker gray color means it's empty, right? And then the dot here, that is a keyframe. The hollow dot, the dot that's not filled in, means it's a keyframe. There's a keyframe there, but it's not. There's nothing on that keyframe. So if I select this layer and I draw in a shape, see how it fills in? So for example, if you remove these frames here and there's no more, there's nothing there, this object would disappear. See how it disappears right there because now it's not there. But if you want it to happen the whole time, you can drag this forward and it'll stay on the whole time. But when you drag something forward, it'll create a keyframe as well, so just keep that in mind. Okay, Tweens. Tweens, basically when you create a tween, and it's not a symbol like I did earlier. So for example, if I take this and I move, drag this, create a new frame here. So insert keyframe, then moved it here, and then create a tween here. Watch this over here. Create classic tween. So what I just did was, it'll do the tween for me, which is what I want, which is what most people do. But it created two tweens here, two new symbols. It basically converted this symbol, so this from going point A to point B here, and it turned that into a symbol, that whole action, into tween 1. And then tween 2 basically is nothing. It doesn't do anything, but it still takes this from here to here into account, because when we dragged over and we created keyframes, our selection applied that tween to both this point A, point B, and then this point A and point B, if that makes any sense. So that's why you have two tweens here. So my recommendation would be, instead of applying a tween to this, what we want to do is convert this into a symbol first, box 2, then create our keyframe, then move it, then apply the tween. Okay, so now we can delete these two, and you end up with just one symbol. Which means if I, actually, for example, let me move this way or something. This isn't working because this is a different keyframe than this. So I'm going to drag this over, and so the way I have to do this is I have to click, hold down Alt, and then drag. Otherwise, it won't do it the way. So if I went over here and drag this, see, it selects it all. So what you need to do is click first, then hold Alt, and then drag. Okay, so now it'll stay there. So for now, if I wanted to change this, I can change this, and it'll make that change throughout the whole animation. Otherwise, what happened before was, let me do it with another one. Convert to keyframe. And then we're going to move these over here, and then apply our classic tween. Still animates, but if I wanted to go inside of it and change the color to something else, it'll do for that, but it won't do it for this set of tweens. Okay, and again, tween 3, tween 4. See the difference there? So you're saving yourself a lot less work by creating the symbol first, then adding your tween instead of adding the tween and then having Adobe Animate create your symbol for you. So that's a rundown of keyframes, the timeline. These numbers here basically represent where you are at in the timeline. So this is frame 1. All the way over here, this is frame 45. I can't go past this because I don't have any more frames past this. Okay. When you add frame, these little top, areas here, these are all considered frames. Okay. Everything that has a color here, anything that has a dot is a keyframe. Anything that is this looking thing, this different colored gray that's kind of tabbed out, this means it's empty. There's nothing there. So keep an eye on that. So next time when you're making an animation and like stuff is disappearing and reappearing, it's because of your frames, right? You're either missing frames here, or you're missing frames there, or missing frames there will be the reason why things will disappear and reappear. These are controls, so you can play, go back to the first, and each control has an associate shortcut to it as well. So if you hover over it, it'll tell you what the shortcut is. You can remove the camera. You can make new layers. You can make folders, new folders. You can delete layers. You can create onion skin, which is a totally another subject, but super useful. This controls what frames you're on. This tells you what frames per second you're using, which typically in animation is 24 frames per second. Video is usually 30. And then this tells you how long your animation is when you're at the end. So 50 frames it would be 2.1 seconds of a minute. Which, considering it takes 24 frames to make up a whole second, it's, a lot. This zooms in and zooms out of the timeline. And that's basically it, you guys. For your last thing I'm going to tell you is to organize your library a little bit more. You can create folders, so you can say symbols, and then you can drag all your symbols into here. I'm holding down Shift to select multiple things, and then what I would do is create a folder called images. So any images that you import will go there, so on and so forth. You can filter in what you will need. So like if you need that one mouth symbol, you just type in mouth here, and it'll just filter out the mouth or anything that's named mouth. Which is another thing why you should name everything on your projects. Okay, I didn't name all of this because this is just like a tutorial for you guys. But yeah, you want to rename everything, so you just double click and name it. So yeah. But yeah, that's basically the overview of Adobe Animate. I hope this was helpful, and let me know what you think in the comments.